Welcome. My name is Jesse Rogers. Now, tonight's conversation is centered on finding long-lasting solutions to the issues facing the sugar sector. The big question is, how do we uplift the dwindling fortunes of the sugar sector, currently supporting over 400,000 small-scale farmers who supply over 90% of milled cane? The recently convened Lake Economic Bloc Sugar Conference had major declarations ranging from outgrower companies to be revived and allowed shareholding in the planned listing of state-owned factories, introduction of sugar development levy, the zoning of sugarcane farming under clustered regions, including restricting weighbridges to their respective catchment regions. So we plug into the ongoing national conversation in terms of what can be done to revitalize the ailing sugar industry in terms of finding long-lasting solutions. I'm joined by one of my esteemed guests. Allow me to introduce him as we get into the conversation. Saulo Busolo joins me in studio. He's the chairperson of the Kenya National Alliance of Sugarcane Farmers Organizations in the country. Asante sana for your time. Bwana Saulo, karibu sana.
Thank you very much for the welcome and the invitation.
Well, thank you for your time as well. Looking forward to proper deliberations right here. It's also proper to mention that we're expecting the Deputy Governor of Kakamega County, Ayub Savula. Once he arrives, we'll try and plug him into the conversation, but the show must go on. So, Saulo, we're having this conversation in the backdrop of the first ever sugar cane conference to be held in the country. And of course, this involved various governors from the Lake Region Economic Bloc, and they had a couple of recommendations in terms of controlling the issues that are facing the sugar sector in the country. And it would be proper to start with one of the issues they recommended in terms of zoning of sugarcane farming, which should be done under clustered regions. This move has been touted perhaps to cure cane poaching that happens in the region, but it begs the question, perhaps as you explain why you support this or you're against this, will this truly cure cane poaching? And is there another way to approach this particular issue? Yeah.
Thank you for the question. That's a very, very important matter that really is afflicting the sugar industry. But the first things first, you said the conference was organized by governors. So it was not really a farmers' meeting. It was a governors' conference. So the voice of the farmer perhaps could be me. Okay. And I'm here to raise the voice of the farmer.
Thank you.
What you've raised is the voice of the governors. Two, the issue of terminology. Poaching, as I understand it, is really a wildlife idea, something applicable to the national parks. But to transpose it, to transfer it to sugarcane entrepreneurs, sugarcane farmers, I think it's stretching a little bit
But what
far.
do they usually mean by cane poaching? That
it's something that has been brought into the sugar industry by those who are unable to compete in this industry. The issue is the sugar industry consumes sugarcane.
Okay.
Mills, sugar factories consume sugarcane. Now, there must be an adequate amount of sugarcane to be crushed by a factory. In a situation where the factory doesn't have enough sugarcane, those who are unable to raise the productivity to attain enough level raw material to crush are the ones who usually use that term to mean in reference to a competitor perhaps who's doing well. Let me put it this way so that probably your listeners get it better.
Yeah.
Previously, the organization of the sugar industry in its beginnings was around plantations. And you know that this is an industry that's also identified with slave labor. This is the industry that built Britain. This is the industry, sugar is what built America, what built Europe, Britain, etc. Towns like London, Liverpool, they've developed on the basis of the sugar industry.
Okay.
Now, when it came to these our countries, it came as a way of encouraging the small-scale holders. When in the 60s, the government wanted to stem rural-urban migration, they came up upon the sugar industry as one way of a rural industry which people could practice, earn some cash, also kind of enabling people who are not in a cash economy to enter a cash economy.
Okay.
That's one major thing.
Yeah.
Now, having done that, the conditions under which it arrived in this country are not the conditions that really the industry was founded upon. Plantations, and the plantation is a zone. But here, when Ramisi just began, and the entrepreneurs who started Ramisi at the coast basically enticed the people around them to plant sugarcane. The same for Miwani. Now, these were private industries.
Okay.
Then, in the 60s, the independent government starts projects of development. What is development? How do you develop the country? We are now independent. So they begin these industries, Mumias, Mohoroni, Chemelil, Sony, etc. This government factory started with zones. Now, when the private industries like West Kenya came up later on in the 70s, they began as smallholder enabled factories. When West Kenya began, they did not begin with a zone that government demarcated a land, alienated people from their land, create a nucleus. No. Now, West Kenya began on the basis of the livelihood of the people. So they just bought a small area, built a factory, but the community continued on the livelihood they had depended on previously. Some picked up sugarcane growing.
Okay.
But now, later on, when competition sets in, when other private entrepreneurs come in, when Butali comes in, for instance, Butali comes in within the neighborhood of West Kenya. And when it comes in, at that time, I was a member of the Sugar Board.
Okay.
The Sugar Board was the one licensing factories. The argument of Butali was that it has enough area to grow cane within that radius. West Kenya went to court over it to block Butali. But the current Chief Justice, Justice Koome, in her ruling, I think, she was, at that time on the Court of Appeal, in her ruling, dismissed West Kenya argument that there can be no zoning. This is a liberalized economy, there is free trade, and the issue of zoning does not arise. But it has still persisted despite this legal judgment that exists.
Okay.
Kibos, another example quickly. Kibos emerges on the horizons of, or the neighborhood of Miwani. What's the argument of Kibos? No, we have enough cane. The issue is productivity. But now, these factories that arose on the basis of arguing for free trade, arguing for Sokohuru, are now on the forefront of arguing that there should be zoning. Some of us, in fact, I'm known in the industry as a Sokohuru person, and I advocate for it.
Okay.
Because the problem with it was, in these government factories, when there was zoning, farmers, these factories' performance was wanting, and the farmers would stay with their cane for years without any payment. Okay. The factories would delay harvesting. They do not care. The services deteriorated when it came to farmers. They could not even pay. There was a lot of mismanagement in this factory to the level where, as we're speaking now, all those factories are down. They are down on account of mismanagement, if you ask me.
Okay.
From where I sit, it's mismanagement that has brought them down. But now, instead of confronting mismanagement, people want to bring this idea of zoning. We say, no, you cannot benchmark against the worst. Let's benchmark against the best. Okay. And what is the best? These private sector players that have come in. The private sector players are now West Kenya, Naitiri, Butali, Kibos, Transmara, Kwale. These are run on a private basis. They make profit. They pay farmers on time. They harvest on time.
Okay.
So the idea of zoning, for me, as farmers, we have said no, and we tell whoever wants to listen to us that zoning is not applicable. Tea is not zoned. Coffee is not zoned. Sugar millers themselves do not zone themselves. You don't find that Kibos only sells its sugar in Kisumu, or Butali sells only sugar in Kabras, or West Kenya sells its sugar in Kakamega. So please, let them leave us as free. There is nothing wrong for me to contract with any private player who pays me well, whom I feel gives me good services. So that is where the position of the farmers. But bureaucrats, some governors, not all, some politicians, who, in my view, perhaps linked through privilege of one kind or other and something you can go into, are the ones hooked up on this idea.
So it doesn't have any benefit from where you said, number one, especially to the farmer.
Not at all.
Because the argument around zoning is, if you're planting cane in an area perhaps next to, in the zone where Mumia's sugar is, for example, you are inclined to sell your cane to none other but Mumia's sugar. As simple as that.
As I say, historically that's where it was.
Okay.
But it's been passed by time. The context is not applicable. For instance, all of us want Mumias to be revived. But Mumias cannot be revived on the basis on which it operated that time. Because Mumias has a 10,000 TCT factory, tons of cane per day factory, existed on the basis of an area that extended into Bungoma, an area that extended into Busia, an area that extended into Nabaholo area, for instance. But today, Busia has 2 factories. Bungoma has got a new factory, Naitiri. So Mumias cannot operate on that basis of zoning. The only scientific way of approaching this matter is productivity now. If you want to operate Mumias, apply scientific methods of production, increase productivity, yield per hectare. Make sure the farmers are enabled to do good cultural, agronomic husbandry so that they produce more per area. That's the only way out. But to say zoning, it's not geography that is the problem. It's productivity, and this is science, not politics.
So at the end of the day, a private sugar farmer will be disadvantaged in one way or the other if zoning is applied, because they will be inclined to sell to the sugar miller in their area, not to the highest bidder, if I'm getting you correctly.
It's not even that the issue is not even advantage or disadvantage. What the argument we posting is, as farmers, we are free people. Please let nobody enslave as farmers. We want to operate as free. The market economy operates on the basis of freedom. That is the absolute.
As simple as that.
That's where the whole matter lies. So any other issue that comes in is possibly regulation. And regulation is allowed. Even we farmers, we feel regulation through certain rules that under the current constitution of public participation that involves all the participants, we have no problem with that.
All right. That's important to note, and we've just talked about one of those contentious issues in terms of the recommendations that were made and some of the views of the farmers of which you represent. Let's talk about something that sticks out, and you mentioned that, you know, robust cane development is quite critical in terms of a revival and commercialization of state-owned sugar factories. And we've heard from the president, who was recently in Western Kenya, asking the question, how comes, you know, private millers are making money while government-owned millers are making losses year in, year out? And it definitely brings to the forefront the issue of effectiveness of the government-owned millers. From where you sit, is it simply an issue of mismanagement? in terms of the government-owned millers and how they're ran? Why are they making losses year in, year out?
It's actually, thank you for that question. It's very important. It's, from where I see it, it's mismanagement.
Simple.
It's a question of poor management. I'll give you an example. Why would a factory of equivalent production, let's say, let me use where I come from. I come from Bungoma. Nzoia is close by me. Mm-hmm. Yes, people are looking for employment in this world. But why would Nzoia have 70 employees in the finance department and West Kenya or Kibos have 10 employees in the finance department? Why would Nzoia have 500 security personnel, whereas Kibos or Butalo, West Kenya have 20? Just if you just pick it at that level.
Okay.
2, the issue of procurement. Yes, one could quarrel with the government procurement procedures that they are long. They may be so, but why would a similar product or element purchased by Nzoia be more expensive than that purchased by West Kenya or Butali or Kibos? These are the issues. These are the issues, my brother. So let's take just the elements within the Nzoia, for instance, had even a factory that was left by some rock company that was meant to expand it. So a full-fledged factory on the ground.
Okay.
And yet, some people think, the factory has been vandalized. One wonders if this vandalism was also entered in the accounts books as elements or stuff bought, procured, when perhaps, possibly, one needs to investigate, it could have just been vandalized.
Okay.
Then, this issue of mismanagement needs to be expanded because government mills are audited by the Public Investment Committee of Parliament, PIC. What are the PIC reports on these government mills? For over these years, until now, the factories have grounded. The Auditor General also go through the books of accounts of these factories. What are the Auditor General's accounts of these factories? So in a way, I'm simply saying things have been happening and nobody seems to be caring. But at the same time, there has been an increase of private investment from West Kenya to Butali. So there is now the proportion of private investment in the industry is more than that of government investment. So one could say the industry, strictly speaking, is private, and that is the way to go.
Interesting. Okay. So you've definitely answered my question on the issues on mismanagement. So in terms of making this particular sector beneficial to the farmer, it's all about reaping profits.
Yes.
And how exactly does the sugar price setting work in the country? Are the prices controlled by market forces, the power of demand and supply? I understand there's usually a minimum price that is set. Tell us more on this so we understand perhaps how the farmer is being undercut in this whole process. Do government millers equally pay on time? Talk to us about how the prices.
The payment to farmers in the industry is on according to a formula. This formula has really not worked, so to speak. It's early, about 2004. Or let me just rephrase. Payment is done on the basis of weight, the weight of the sugar cane.
Okay.
The factories, when a farmer harvests or cuts their cane, the cane is transported to the weigh bridge of the factory, it's weighed, then the payment is on that basis.
Okay.
Now, there is, in terms of strictly speaking law, there is payments supposed to be done on the basis of sucrose in the content, sucrose content in the cane.
Okay.
On that basis, the European Union assisted the government of Kenya to do a feasibility for that quality payment by sucrose. So laboratories to do that have been developed in almost, I think, all of the factories. But the implementation is yet to be done. So payment by weight is still is still the practice. What is the formula? The formula in place is what they call a simplified payment formula, where the sharing ratio is 50-50.
Okay.
So you take the cost of production of the miller, the cost of production of the farmer, 50-50, depending on the productivity of the mill, whose efficiency level has been marked at being the best practice 10 tons. 10 tons to produce 1 ton of sugar. Okay. That is the measurement. So if you do that, then you're doing very well. The best practice in the world is countries that Brazil or South Africa usually is about 8. But here, the simplified formula has adopted 10. Okay. This, which also, to digress a bit, the mismanagement in the state farms, if you go to check the perimeters, they sometimes use 16, 17. So you see, that's total waste of resources. Now, back to the formula. Okay. So you take the previous price of sugar, last month price of sugar, times 50, which is the sharing ratio 50-50 over 10, which is the efficiency level that has been adopted. This is the system that was utilized by West Kenya. It was adopted by Sugar Board about 2004. It's still the one in. But this, I need to quickly add, briefly, as farmers, we think this is not equitable. Because the cost of production, you know, in terms of the farmer and the miller are not the same. Sometimes farmers quarrel, they don't get the figures from the mills. So the calculation may not be very good. Practice elsewhere, farmer share is over 60%, not 50%. And here, the profit, if you use the formula, the profit ends up at the retail level, wholesale. Not even mill get price or farm get price. So it's the traders, the wholesale retail traders that make more money in this formula. So for me, I would say the formula needs to be revised to favor the farmer.
Interesting. So we've definitely understood his take on the price setting, what needs to be done to at least favor the farmer. We're taking a short break. As we come back, we take a look at the calls to address the delinking of the sector from the Agricultural Food Authority, AFA. That's one of the issues that farmers are sort of pushing. Equally, on the debt issue, we've heard from President William Ruto, who's sort of committed to writing off the 117 billion shilling debt owed by state-owned mill in the country. How should we go about this so we don't find ourselves in a similar scenario in previous dispensations who actually released money to write off the debt, but very little can be said about the benefits of that particular money? Allow us to take a short break. As we come back, we will bring into the conversation the Deputy Governor of Kakamega County, Ayub Savula, who will equally give us his take on this matters and more. Do stay with us.